Hello there, and thanks so much for joining me for another tutorial. I'm Erin Eno, and today we're going to be painting this kind of European rustic stucco wall with wisteria and a wooden door. If you do enjoy this tutorial, please be sure to give it a thumbs up, and if you want to see more like it, please be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. Now grab your paints and let's get started. Today I'm using my Baohong Academy cold press watercolor paper. It's 140 pound, 100% cotton. I have my Royal Talons Van Gogh paints in my palette, a jar of water and a paper towel, and I have 4 brushes today. Actually, sorry, I have 5. I have a Curry's 2500 series in a size 12 round. You don't need a brush like this. I just need to lay a fair amount of water in this area, so I wanted a larger brush, but primarily we will be using a size 6 round in the Curry's 2400 series, and you will need a couple or at least one small brush, and I have 2 Princeton Snap size 2 and size 0, both round, and I will also be using my old beat up craft brush just to do some stippling on the wall. If you don't have a craft brush like this, you can use maybe a really tiny sea sponge if you have that, or you can just use a small brush and just tap on the little stucco dots individually. Just will take you a little bit more time. And we're also going to do a quick sketch, so you'll need a pencil and an eraser. So we're going to keep this whole thing fairly simple. So I just want to, a couple of inches up, maybe 1.5 inches up, I'm just going to draw a line, and that will be the basic ground line. I forgot to mention my sheet's roughly 5.5, 7.25-ish, something like that. So just establish your ground line. Mine's a little wonky, and this is kind of loose and rustic, so it doesn't have to be perfect. Then we're going to establish where we want our door to be, and I want mine to be just in the bottom right hand corner, so I'm just going to draw a line straight up and down for both sides of the door, just like that. I'll try to draw this dark enough so you can see it, but I don't want to draw it too dark. I've got a double line there, but that's okay. Now we're going to just join these lines up with an arc, because we're doing like an arched door. Just like so. This could be a little rounder. I'm going to round it off just a little bit more. And then we're going to put a little step on this door. Okay, so the door itself will actually be up this little step here. And because we're going to have this kind of set like we're looking at it from this kind of angle, we're going to have it set back a little bit. Okay, so we're just going to draw a line just about a 45-degree angle, maybe not quite, and then we're just going to draw this up like so. Okay, so that'll be like the little inside of the door, and you'll see the kind of perspective of the step there, just like that. So it's a little door kind of inset into the building. So I'm just going to lighten those lines, and then we're going to start to paint. So we're going to start with the wooden door, and I'm going to take a mixture of light oxide red and a bit of yellow ochre. I want a real light color. I did a little quick mini watercolor sketch of this, and the wooden door was a little dark, so I want to make sure I don't make it too dark. It's a little red, so I'm going to add some raw umber in there as well. And I think that'll be a nice wooden color. And I'm going to water it down, because I would rather start the door off light than go too dark. and not be able to undo that. So now I'm going to take my size 6 brush and I'm just going to fill in where we had this door. And I've got my paper taped to a board. As you know, I like to do that just because it's easier to turn your sheet when you need to. You can pick it up and look at it. A lot easier. And I want to make sure I keep this edge wet. I don't want any hard edges on my door. And then while it's still a little bit wet, I want to take my smaller brush. So I'm going to go down to my size 2. And I'm going to take a slightly darker mixture of that same brown, and I'm just going to draw some very faint lines. Just 3 of them. So that'll give our door like 4 wooden panels. And those aren't the actual, separations of the panel. They're just like the little shadows. We're going to go in and put a more defined line down there. But we're going to let that dry for now. And I'm going to go to the ground here. And I want to make it a little bit of a kind of a cobblestone look. So I'm going to use my neutral tint. And I'm going to add in some of that brown that we made for the door. And I'm just going to paint a faint line where we had that ground line. Okay, and then I'm going to wet my brush and just kind of push this around. Very loose. Don't want it too dark. It's going to dry lighter. Just like that. And then to give it a little bit of a cobblestone look, see, I'm almost dry brushing now. I don't want like a full wash. We want that kind of rustic look. And I'm going to go into that same mixture and just put some little areas in that are a little heavier. And it'll kind of give us that impression that it's a little rustic kind of cobblestone road or pathway. Just like that. If some of them you think are a little heavy, you can just go in and pick up some of that paint. Okay. I think that's good. Now we're going to go and leave this to dry. And I'm going to take my size 12 brush, and like I said, it doesn't have to be size 12, it can be whatever, just as long as it's big enough to lay water down all in this area. Okay, so we're going to wet the whole thing. I'm not drenching it, but I just want it all wet. And because I don't know where this wisteria is going to start or stop right yet, I'm just going to wet this entire area. Just like that. Okay, so now I'm going to go in with my size 6. Make sure it's completely green and completely clean. And I'm going to take some permanent blue violet and I'm going to water it right down. And I'm also going to mix up some sap green maybe with a little bit of ultramarine deep. I'm going to go back to my size 2. I'm going to get this purple wash, and now we're going to start laying down where we want this wisteria to go. And I want my wisteria to come just a little bit above the door and hang right down to the door there. So I'm just putting in these little lines where I want my wisteria to hang. Okay, and we want this just really light, and it's going to bleed out. Get a little bit more. Just like that. Now we're going to do the same thing with the sap green. Just tap in little areas of green here and there. And I'm having it fade off at the top as well. I don't want a harsh edge on any of this. And I'm going to pick up some of that sap green that has the ultramarine deep in it. So we've got little variations of green. And while it's still wet, with the size 2 still, I'm going to go in with a slightly heavier mixture or more pigmented mixture of that purple. I'm going to tap off the excess water off my brush, and we're just going to start tapping in little areas of wisteria. We're not painting anything deliberately here. We're just tapping in. And you don't want it to bleed all throughout those soft edges. Just a little bit up at the top. Some of it coming down a bit. We don't want this to overtake and become too detailed or too literal at this point. Okay, this is going to be a loose painting. And I don't want it to get too dark, so I don't want to overdo it. I'll go in and get a little heavier mixture of the sap green as well and do the same thing. But don't cover up the light areas entirely, okay? Leave those in there and just put little hits of it. So now while that's drying, we can go back to the door, and I'm going to go back to that neutral tint mixture, and we're just going to paint in the little step here. Okay. So this front facing part will be fairly light. This might be a little too dark. If I feel it's too dark, I can tap some up with my paper towel. Like so. And then to make this look a little kind of rustic, we can just maybe, I don't know if this is going to work, I'm just going to kind of tap, just so it's not just a straight flat wash. We want that little step to have a little bit of texture to it. Okay. And I don't want to do the darker edge on that step just yet. I want to wait till that dries. So while that's drying, I'm going to go to my size 0. And we're going to go back to the door because it's fairly dry now, because we didn't really lay down a lot of paint. And I'm going to take that brown mixture that we used for the door, and I'm going to add in just a little bit of that neutral tint. And just with the very tip of my brush, I'm just going to turn this. We're just going to do those lines, and they will be the little slats I've kind of lost that little shaded line that I want in there, but that's okay. If I want to put it back, I can always go in after. Okay, so those are the slats of our doors. We can also at this point go into that brown, water it down a little bit so it's almost the same consistency that we did for the door. And because we're going over that same color, it will naturally heavy up. But you can't afford to go a little bit deeper because we're just going to start to do some little wood grain. Okay, so you're just going to take your brush, the very, very tip, so you need the smallest brush for this, and just start painting in some squiggly lines and some knots in the wood. Don't overdo it. You don't want too much texture here that it kind of takes away from everything else. But you do obviously want it to look like wood. A couple of knots in there. I'm going to put a door handle on this too, so just like that. Now it's not realistic. It's not supposed to be realistic. It's supposed to be kind of fun and stylized. And while that's drying, our wisteria is starting to dry a little bit. So I'm going to go in with my size 0 and go into some heavier pigmented purple and start putting in some more deliberate wisteria. That to me is still a little dark. Just going to tap that up a bit and water it down just a little bit. This still seems a little dark, but I'm just going to kind of tap it around. And you can soften it up with your brush, like so. And I'm just kind of staying towards the top at this point, because I really don't want my wisteria to go really dark. If it starts to look like it's getting a little dark, you can always just go in and start moving things around with a little bit of a damp brush. Okay. And we're going to soften them a little smudgier towards the bottom. And we are going to go back in and put some really defined little wisteria flowers. But for now, I just want to kind of keep it fairly soft. And you don't want to cover up those little ghosted purple areas. You want to keep some of them. Okay, so I feel it's getting a little rigid here, so I'm just going to go in with my damp brush, soften these guys out a bit, like that. And we're going to do the same thing with the green. Okay, so it's a little more pigmented than when we first laid it down, but not too drastic. And we're going to do the same thing. And again, don't cover all the light misty areas. Okay, we're just tapping some in here and there, and I think that's good. We want it to look painterly and like watercolor, you know. We don't want to make this really realistic. So this is dry enough now that we can start going in and adding some shading around the door. Actually, you know what? No, let's go back to my size 0. And I'm going to go into that neutral tint. With a bit of that brown, but it's going to be a little darker this time. And I'm just going to do the part of the step that goes into the doorway. So it's going to be darker than this front facing piece. Okay, and I'm going to take it all the way across to the edge of the wall. Just like that. You could probably even afford to be a little bit darker. Maybe not that dark. Just lift a little bit of it up. It'll dry lighter as well, so. Okay, so now I want to wait for that to dry before we go in and do the shading, but I think we can go in and do the little door handle. And I'm just going to keep that really simple as well. I don't want my size 2, I want my size 0. And I'm just going to use straight black for this. Nothing complicated, just a straight black door handle. Okay, so just with the tip of my brush, I'm just going to draw, not drawing, I'm painting, just a long kind of rectangle. Okay, we're not doing shading or shape on this or anything, just a little indication of a door handle. And I'm just going to do a little kind of a T-shaped door handle. You could even kind of round it up there if you want. Give it a little bit of character, just like that. Nothing fancy. You could go in with your paper towel if you want, a very fine tip, and just tap some of it up, just to give it some shape, like that. You don't have to do that. And I think I want to go in and put the little shadow between those slats that kind of disappeared on me. So I'm going into that same brown mixture for the wood, and I'm just going to follow this line. It's very subtle, but I just want it to have a little bit of a shape to it. Like that. So while that's all drying and kind of settling down, I'm going to go in with my craft brush, and I'm going to, well, first of all, I'm going to take a little bit of a mixture, and I don't even know if this is on camera, but there's the neutral tint. Okay, and I want it still kind of neutrally gray, but I'm going to warm it up a little bit with that brown. Just like that. Maybe a little more. Okay, so this is where I'm going to go in with my craft brush now. And I'm just going to dampen it. Like I say, if you don't have a craft brush that's kind of beat up like this, you can use your brush and just do individual kind of stucco lines, but I'm just going to lightly tap it. And I'm turning my brush so I don't get the same pattern everywhere. And I don't want it too dark, but I do want it noticeable. Don't forget this side. Some up in the wisteria. Okay. And there's actually kind of some areas over there that I'm not big on, so I'm gonna just kind of scrub at these. See if I can pick it up a little bit. They just kind of went a little too much. Sorry if my camera's shaking while I'm doing this. A little too much going on here too. Actually, I like it still on there, but a little softer. I don't mind that. So I'm just going to kind of scrub at it a little bit. Just like that. Okay. I think that's looking not too bad. And I think I just want to heavy up a little bit of that cobblestone look. I don't want it to go too bad. I might regret this. I don't know. I'm just going to see if I can just put a few more little cobblestone areas. Like so. And I think everything here is dried enough that we're going to put this shadow in now. Now I want the wall to have kind of a rounded edge, so it's not going to be a real harsh edge on this shadow, but I don't want it getting away from me, so I'm going to do it with my size 2 brush. And I'm going to use the same kind of neutral tint mixture. And I'm going to start, because I don't want it going crazy on me, and there's only going to be a shadow on this side because of the perspective view that we're having. We're looking at it from a little bit of the right side. Okay, so I'm just going to fill this all in. And this shadow, the edge of the wall ends where that step is. Okay, so we're going to bring it down to that step. Just like so. But while it's wet, because I want that wall to have a little bit of a soft edge to it, I don't want it to be like a harsh wall edge. And this just is gonna, this little shadow is just gonna end just at the top of that door frame. So as I was saying, I want this wall to have a little bit of a rounded edge so the shadow won't be crisp on that left side. It'll be a little soft. So I'm going to clean my brush off just so it's a little damp. And we're just going to soften this edge a little bit. We don't want it bleeding right out. Just want to soften it up. Just like that. Okay, and if you want, we can go in. Actually, you know what? I'm going to go in with my size 0 now. I just want the shadow to be a little deeper towards the inside. So I'm just going to take my size 2. Sorry, I'm turning my board constantly on you. And I'm just going to touch this edge and just have a little more depth come through where that shadow would be heavier. My voice is kind of froggy today. It's really damp out, that might be why. And I'm looking at this upside down. I sure hope I'm not screwing up the shape of my door. I think I might be. That's okay. I said this was rustic and not perfect, right? So there you go. That is the shadow for the door. The little doorway. I think I'm just going to bring the shadow up here just a little bit, but not all the way across, just very light. Okay. Now we're going to go back to our Wisteria. It actually works out good because while this is drying, we can keep going back to our Wisteria. So I kind of like how that's working out. And I'm going to go back to my permanent blue violet. And it's quite pigmented now. And I think I'm going to switch to my size 0 because I don't want this to get away on me. And we're just going to put a few real deliberate Wisteria blooms down here. And then we're going to heavy up some areas up here. And we're going to do the same thing. We're not going to do it all really heavy. And we're just going to go in and kind of soften up with some water as we go. Okay. It's quite easy to overdo this, and I really don't want, you know, your eye to just be going to the Wisteria and not the door. I just kind of want to make sure that it stays reasonably balanced. But I just do want the odd little speckle of Wisteria that's really crisp in some areas towards the bottom. But we are trying to keep this painterly, right? So it's not, you know, literal. So if you do see areas that you think are too prominent, just go soften them up with a damp brush, just like that. Just make sure that you leave some nice light areas, because we want this to fade off here and we want it to fade off at the top too. We're not going, you know, harsh at all with this. Very, I don't want to say subtle, but just not so in your face. Okay, so you can see I'm leaving light areas there and then following up with some Wisteria hanging down just to give it a little bit of interest. And it's easy to overwork this, so don't get carried away with it. And we're going to do the same thing with the green. And tap some darker areas of the green in, just like so. And again, make sure that you leave some of those light areas showing, some of the, like the soft areas. And if there's just one last thing I want to do, just to give this a little more dimension. So I'm going to go to my size 2 brush, and I'm going to go to that neutral tint mixture. So it's not very dark, it's not highly saturated, okay? And we're just going to do a little shadow on the door now. Let me get this out of the way. Just going to go all the way up and kind of mimic that arc that's coming off the building. So this is a light wash, So I'm hoping that it will still kind of look like a brown door underneath once it dries. Maybe I could even round this out a little bit. And I'm not going to soften this edge because that's going to cast a fairly kind of definite shadow. So I think I'm going to call this done, and I will take it off this board so we can see what it really looks like without that distraction. And there you go. There is our quaint little Stucco Cottage wall with Wisteria. I hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial and that you found it helpful. And if you do want to give this a try and you're on Instagram, please be sure to share your work and tag me so I can have a look. Thanks so much for joining me and so much for supporting my channel. I really appreciate it. Take care, and I will see you next time.